Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me to be here. It's really a pleasure. This is actually my 5th time speaking to the Bar Association, so we have a long history together. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank, again, all of you very much for having me. As you know, listening to me previously, this is my book that I had the pleasure of writing a few years ago. I've talked about concepts in the book the last few times that we've been together. I'm not going to do that today because you've already heard all that, so we're going to move on to some new stuff, if this works. Let's see. It's not working. Okay. This is my website. It's SISRP.com. Safe Income Solutions Retirement Planning. That's what I do. That's my expertise. I'm a licensed insurance agent, and I specialize in life insurance and also in annuities. And so there's a lot of great information on the website. One of the things I want to call your attention to on occasion, we put new things in the news portion of it, and I do a blog as well. There are video blogs and written blogs. If you are having a CD that's renewing sometime soon, you might want to check that out, because the rates on short-term annuities for 2 and 5 years right now are running from 2.75 to 3.9 and a little bit higher than that depending on the deposit amount. They're real simple annuities where the deposit just earns whatever the interest rate is, and at the end of the term then you can walk away with the full amount just like with the CD. So they're really some great rates. They far outperform the CD rates right now. So check it out, SISRP.com. So today I want to talk about some retirement strategies, and we're going to talk about asset allocation versus income allocation. Asset allocation is probably what most of you are doing right now, which of course is putting your money into 401ks, 403bs, 457, that type of thing, traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. It's the belief that investors should hold a mix of large cap, mid cap, small cap, and then also supplement that with real estate holdings and commodities, maybe precious metals, and maybe revolving gold toward your retirement. So asset allocation is all about building those assets. The thing about the asset allocation with all of these, of course, is that all of those assets are at risk, right? If you own a home, you know that in 2008, we had the bubble that burst, and that really hurt the values of our homes. So having that asset at risk all the time might be of some concern, whether you're planning for retirement or you're actually in retirement now. But of course, the other things that are mentioned here are things that are put into market accounts and mutual funds and others, so it's at risk. Income allocation is where you're planning for the future to have a guaranteed income. The idea is to devote enough money to a vehicle that delivers guaranteed income. So I would encourage you to think about where you are in your retirement, either planning or actually in retirement, and do you have things in place that are actually guaranteed income? And we're going to talk about some of those things today. I don't know if you've talked to whoever it is that's your advisor. Have you talked about things that can guarantee income later on when you're in retirement? One of the biggest fears today, of course, is people thinking that they might run out of money at some point in their retirement. And our retirements now are much longer than they ever used to be, right? They're not just 10 and 20 years, but now they're 30, 40 years or even longer. So obviously we don't want to get into our 80s or even into our 90s and suddenly be running out of money. And so there needs to be a focus on making sure that you have income allocation set up. So let's talk about money just for a second and how that works. One of the most important rules about money is called the Rule of 72. I'm sure you've all heard of it. it says that for whatever rate of return you're going to get, in this case it's 4%, if you divide that number or any other number into 72, it's going to tell you the number of years that it will take you to double your money over time. And so Einstein thought that was really cool because it works for all numbers. So in this case, a 4% rate of return is going to give you 18 years for your money to double. So we're not adding more money to what we have in our deposit. We're just letting the interest rate have its effect on it. So if we're looking at different numbers here, at 4%, if you were 29 years old and you had $10,000 in the bank, it's going to have 2 doubling times by the time you retire at 65. So you'd have $40,000. But if we could somehow increase that rate of return from 4 to 8%, now our money's going to double every 9 years. So again, we're not adding new money to it, but we're increasing just based on the rate of return. So at 65 now, rather than 40,000, we have $160,000. But if we could somehow get 12% on our money, which we could, then our money is going to double every 6 years. And now that has a tremendous effect on our bottom line by the time we turn 65. So now we've got $640,000, and that's just having interest have its effect on our money over time. So of course the $1 million question is, how can we get 12% rate of return on our money? I do know. As it turns out, the Standard & Poor's Index, which of course is the S&P 500, was established in 1923. It's the 500 most widely held publicly traded companies in the United States today. So it's our 500 greatest companies. If you look at that list of companies over a period of time, it's changed a little bit, but not very much, right? You're going to still see those top companies in there. It represents 100 different indices, and for the past 78 years, it's averaged about 10.7%. But for the past 20 years, it's averaged 11.6. So now you can see we're approaching that 12% range where our money's going to double every 6 years. And as it turns out, you can't see it at the bottom there, I think you can. It's outperformed over 80% of all the mutual funds over that period of time. Most retirement accounts are made up of those mutual funds, whether you're in Vanguard or some other kind of mutual fund account. So I think it's important to take a look at how indexing works and how maybe you could apply that to your retirement plan. So here's an example of indexing in graph form. And as you can see, we have 2 accounts here, an indexed account and a stock market account. Now the way these indexed accounts work is that under the contract that you're with in a life insurance policy or an annuity policy, you don't own the stocks in the index. You're only using the index as a gauge or a marker to decide how you're going to be credited as time goes on. So they have different strategies, like one, for example, would be a 1-year point-to-point strategy. And so at the anniversary of the policy, it would calculate the interest earned over the year and then credit it to your account. Or there are 2-year point-to-points and 3-year point-to-points, monthly caps, and so on. But the strategy works the same. So we have an index strategy versus someone that's strictly in the market. So let's say a 401k or a mutual fund account. Both accounts start at $10,000 with their initial deposit, and over the first 2 years they enjoy that 10% gain. Both of them get 10%. So everybody's really happy at the end of 2 years. We're something a little above 12,000. But of course, with the market, whatever you have in the market, it's at risk to market losses, right? And if you watch what's going on in the stock market, you can see that even sometimes within a day or in a week's span of time, you have great fluctuations in the value of your accounts. But the stock market now is going to show a loss over the next couple of years in our example. So it falls from above 12,000 to now it's down below 8,000. So it lost its initial amount that it put in and whatever it gained in those first 2 years. The indexed account, however, has a floor of 0, and that's by contract in the account. So 0 becomes your hero because you can't get less than 0 no matter what the market does, and that's the beauty of indexed. In this example, the indexed account has a cap, and it's at 12%. So it can't get above 12, but it can't get less than 0. And so when the market falls and loses money, in those next couple of years, the index account, it doesn't make any money during those years, right? But the key is that it didn't lose any money. So it stays at that just above $12,000 mark. Now when the market comes back, that index account becomes credited from that $12,100 mark instead of being down below the $8,000. The stock market account has to make back up that ground. And you can see in my example here, over this 5-year period, it's actually 70% higher. And so again, 0 becomes your hero. That's why indexing is such a great strategy to follow. If we're putting some real numbers to it, you can see that even the fixed account at 5% through that period of time, and by the way, these are actual market numbers from 2000 through 2015. So they all start at 100,000, but the market account, always being subject to gains and losses, at the end of the day is underperforming compared to the fixed account and the indexed account. And the indexed account, you can see that in the flat years from 2000 to 2002, it didn't gain, but it kept that 100,000 in its account. And then it takes the market gains as it goes along. And so once again, 0 becomes your hero. If we put some real numbers to it, the market guy is going to tell his client, hey, we did pretty good. We went through some rough years there, but we made 54,000. Isn't that great? And the client's going to say, yeah, that's great. But unbeknownst to the client, there are these other strategies that they could have participated in, where instead of 154,000, they could have been at 259,000, right? So indexing, once again, is the way to go. And you can apply this to any number of years that you want to, and you're always going to find out that the index strategy outperforms the market. Sequence risk is really important. The risk of receiving lower or negative returns early in a period when withdrawals are made from the underlying investments. So if we go back to this last screen, if we entered our retirement at this point, and then we experience those first couple of years of a down market, it's going to have a huge effect on our portfolio. So that when we get into our retirement years, if we're going to rely on the 4% rule to remove money from our retirement account to live on, we're going to have less money available to us to do that. So I know that you've all heard of the 4% rule. William Began, the financial planner known as the creator of the 4% rule, when they asked him if he would follow that rule today, he said that he wouldn't, because it's not safe. There was a study done by Texas Tech, the American College, and Morningstar Investment Management Group, which is one of the largest mutual fund management groups in the world. They did a study, and they did it with these supercomputers to find out whether the 4% rule would work. Turns out it failed 57% of the time. Many people are following that rule in their retirement today, hoping that they can remove that 4% from their retirement account and make inflation adjustments each year as they go along. But it turns out it's a failed model. So we have Jack and Jill we want to talk about. They're brother and sister. Jack's 3 years older than Jill is. Both of them are going to start with $1 million in their retirement account. They both have decided that the 4% rule is the way to go, and that's what they're going to follow. So they're going to take out 4% and then adjust it 3% for inflation each year. So the beginning withdrawal is $40,000 from the account. By 2013, Jack is removing $66,000. So all in, he takes out $936,000, but he still ends up with $1.5 million still in his account. He has a 54% change in value. Jill, on the other hand, retires 3 years later. So remember the graph I had up before that showed from 99 to 2002, the market was coming out of the dot-com years and started having really poor returns as it went. So Jill hit that sequence when the market was going down. Jack hit it when it was going up at the end of the 1990s. But Jill hits it 3 years later. Still with $1 million, she's taken out 4%, 3% inflation adjustment. And so her $40,000 initial withdrawal was adjusted for inflation, and by the time it was 2013, she was taking out 60 grand. But her ending balance, she took out 743,000 over those years, a couple of years, 3 years less than her brother. But at the end of the day, instead of having 1.5 million like her brother, she only had 393,000 in her account. So she actually lost 60% in change in value. And that's because she hit the sequence at the wrong time. So that was her mistake, right? She was born 3 years too late. She hit it at the contraction of the market, whereas Bill hit it at the expansion of the market. So obviously we can't time the markets. We don't know what's going to happen there. And so that makes my point that we need to be focused at least somewhat on income allocation, have some guaranteed income in those later years. Jill is in a situation where she might end up running out of money in her retirement. And the actuarials have just adjusted recently where people are living much longer than before. So, and that's going to continue to go, right? So how can we do that with, how can we assure ourselves that we're going to have that guaranteed income so that you get paid an income from whatever your account is every single year for the rest of your life, no matter how long you live? And annuities can do that for you. Following index annuities like the S&P, using a strategy like the S&P 500, within the contract it's going to guarantee you to be not less than 0 in the graphs that I was showing you before, but also to have that lifetime income that you cannot outlive. So my recommendation would be to my clients is that let's take a look at your portfolio. Let's see where you are right now. What kind of strategy are you following? How much of that portfolio is in risk? And as it turns out, most people are almost at 100% in risk. And that's really worrisome because you can't guarantee that that's going to happen. But if you're putting a portion of that into an annuity or into a life insurance policy, then you can have some guarantees so that there's guaranteed income there. So as we look at what's going on, what do you have that's going to guarantee income? Some have pensions and some have Social Security that go along with it, or one or the other or both. But there's not this additional amount that makes it up. So I always ask clients, if today's the day that you retire, what am I writing the check for this year, for your retirement? How much do you need to continue the lifestyle that you've become accustomed to, that you want to pay yourself every single year for the rest of your life? And then adjust that for inflation as we go. And typically we find tremendous shortfalls in there because they haven't planned toward income allocation. They're planning a little too much toward that asset allocation. So my other recommendation is to make an appointment and sit down with your advisor to see what do they have that they can suggest that can help you on that income side. So here's actually a house on Lake Delton. And the people built their house at the end of the lake, right next to the dam. And it turns out they built their house on pretty sandy soil. So they're in a very risky situation. I mean, on a daily basis, it's beautiful out there, but as it turned out in 2008, they had 14 inches of rain in 2 days period. And so the levee gave way and went into the Wisconsin River, which is right next to it. And then all of the water in the lake rushed out within a 3-hour period. And as it did, it undermined those houses, and eventually they fell into the lake and then got washed away into the river. So we want to make sure that we're planning for our future, make sure that we have everything in place to cover all the bases. And guaranteed income later in life is one of the most important things you can do. And if you plan for it, you'll be very happy that you did. That's all I have. Thank you.